What's up, YouTube? It's your boy. I'm everyone's boy, the Tiki Moss. Today, I got on. I got an actor. I know what you guys are saying. You guys are like, well, TK, you interview professional athletes like basketball players, swimmers, wrestlers. But today, I had to bring on a fellow brand member from the Vince Russo brand. This guy has won over 20 awards in film direction, TV production, screenwriting, and playwriting. This man has shared scenes with Meryl Streep, Wesley Snipes. So give it up to the creative Mike Messier.
What's up, TK? Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate that awesome intro, man. I really do. And we're basically speaking through the wonders of technology, halfway across the country, or most of the way through the country. You're on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. But thank goodness for modern technology and for the Vince Russo brand family for kind of bringing us together. I really appreciate talking with you tonight.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. We use Google Hangout, and then I first found you from Vince Russo, the brand, when he did his little thing he had about the women's Saudi Arabia thing.
Yeah, I was very upset. I just found a lot of hypocrisy in the WWE, kind of pushing this women's empowerment thing for 4 or 5 years. Then they go over to a country which doesn't believe in women's empowerment at all. And honestly, I've spoken to friends of mine that live overseas, and they say that the advancements that that particular country, Saudi Arabia, is advertising are not all that they're cracked up to be. The women over in those countries really still need a male guardian. I mean, it's really pretty bad. So tonight we want to segue, and I appreciate that you reached out to talk about really what I'm good at, which is acting and filmmaking and writing scripts. So that was kind of what brought us together. And special thanks to Vince Russo. He's a great guy. And the brand has been so supportive. JG, Cole, Ben Hameen, everybody over there, Jeff Lane. They really do provide a forum for free thought. And sad as it is, a lot of wrestling fans, TK, don't want to believe in free thought these days. They just want to buy into the machine. But I've watched some of your interviews today. You're not like that. I'm not like that. We're not guys that buy into the machine. And for actors especially, and filmmakers even more so, you've got to think outside the box. You can't just be part of the process, buy your hamburger, buy the T-shirt, and go about your business. You've really got to challenge things in this world. And especially talk about documentary filmmakers, which I've done documentaries, or even writing a script. You've really got to challenge yourself, and most importantly, challenge the audience too. That's what it's all about.
I agree, man. And before we get more into that, let me tell some people about Vince Russo. Well, you guys can, what Mike just said. You guys can go on the brand on Vince Russo's Realm Network to hear all that. It's good content. Vince Russo is a great guy. He was former hair writer of the Attitude Era. So if you guys like wrestling and stuff like that, you can go over there. But like what you were saying, like you're right. You gotta try to be different in a good way.
That's right. Because look, all the people that we look up to in the world, if you have a special acting hero, say like the guy that I worked with, Wesley Snipes. I mean, there's no way that I could copy what Wesley Snipes has done with Blade or with New Jack City. As far as a filmmaker, Mario Van Peebles or Quentin Tarantino. Sometimes people put Tarantino for 20 years. They put Tarantino on a pedestal. And you can even see that in the late 90s, the mid to late 90s, there was a bunch of films. I think one was called 2 Days in the Valley with Charlize Theron. A lot of films copied the Quentin Tarantino formula of intersecting storylines and ensemble pieces and kind of that edgy, Christopher Walken type of character stuff. But honestly, Tarantino's the one that did it first, and he did it the best because it was his thing. A lot of people have tried to copy, say, even a Woody Allen or a Jerry Seinfeld, the nebbish kind of New York City humor. And it works to an extent, but honestly, you've got to find your own voice. So what I wanted to do tonight, TK, is because you asked me about acting, I said, well, tell me about yourself. And we'll kind of go through a thing where it's not as intimate as if we were working together in person on a project, say that you were cast fit in or wanted to audition for. But just as a general kind of rule of thumb, I can give you some thoughts on acting. And to help you specifically, TK. But these same suggestions, maybe the audience can kind of learn from, add to, put in their verbal mix, and see what the heck happens.
I agree. I think the audience would love to know some different acting techniques, maybe how to get into stuff like that, or just how, like, but the behind the scenes. Because I know these days everybody seems to know everything about wrestling, but I don't think the acting industry is like that. Do you, like, what's your thoughts on people knowing what really goes on in, like, Hollywood and acting and stuff like that?
Well, there's a lot of learning vessels. I mean, there's film schools. There's film schools, Full Sail University, ironically enough, where the WWE does, their thing with NXT. If you're a wrestling fan who loves acting, I mean, if I could go back in time, I would go to Full Sail for film and jump in on the NXT tapings, either as an observer or be an intern for the WWE and NXT. If I could go back in time, that's exactly what I would do. So, I mean, you talk about opportunities. There's Maine Media Workshops up in Maine, which is a summer camp for film. They have many great classes, many great teachers. There's Emerson in Boston. There's schools in Connecticut. There's schools in California, schools in Texas. Austin, Texas. I'm not sure what part of Texas you're in, TK, but Austin is a hotbed for film. There's the Austin International Film Festival, which I've entered stuff in. They have a great program over there. They have Richard Linklater, who did Dazed and Confused. He did Slacker, all types of cool stuff, Before Sunrise and Before Sunset with Julie Delpy. So, I mean, in Texas, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of places. I'm not that familiar with Texas, except I know that the Austin International Film Festival is a big deal. And one thing I was thinking about today when I got your email, because I really, we hadn't connected before, and I said, well, what's going on with TK? And you said that you've been doing these interviews, and I watched some of your stuff, and I dug some of your stuff, your Backlash. You interviewed a female basketball player, was pretty interesting. And I basically thought to myself, I wonder if TK has ever tried community theater. And why I bring that up is because when I work with acting students around here, and they say they want to be an actor, one of the first things I say to them, and not in an offensive way, but I say, do you want to act or do you want to be famous? And probably the best answer is to say both. But a lot of people, if they're being truly honest, they just want to be famous, which is fine. But if you want to be an actor, if you want that experience, that thrill, that rush of adrenaline, the attention, the accomplishment of really doing a great role, you've got to do theater. And to do that, it's not as hard as people might think. Basically, there's a website. I just checked it out on my computer to make sure it's still up and running, and it is. I believe it's theater411.com. So THEATER411.com. I'm pretty sure that's it, but just, put it in your Google device or whatever. You'll find theater411.com, and you can put in any state, any city, I think pretty much across the whole USA at least, and you can find what local theater is in your area that you can audition for theater. Now, people might hear that, and some people hear me talk about this might be 20, 25, 30 years old, and they've never gone to see a stage show. Trust me, I've gone through this. And the thing is, they may not realize that things that are on Broadway in New York City, when they think of big productions, Cats, or the producers, whatever they think of, they can see pretty good quality work in Texas, in New England, in California, in Iowa. Any state you're in most likely has some type of live theater where there are actors on stage acting out performances. That might sound a little elementary to some people watching this, but to some people it's mind-blowing. I've been through that with people that had no concept that they could still go see a live show and not go to New York City. Like, there's tons of community theater. I can't stress it enough. If you really want that passion for acting, if you really want that adrenaline, that accomplishment of learning lines, creating a character, having a scene partner, working with a director, the stage manager, all these things, that's there for the taking. Will people get rich off of it? Will they get famous off of it? Probably not. But it's a big stepping stone to being an actor, is joining a community theater, auditioning, taking some classes, group classes with the theaters in your area. And as we're speaking to the world, TK, I don't know, exactly where everybody's at, but I would just say that all you got to do is go to Theater 411. The website, as far as I can tell, is free. and you can find out information. Just put in your zip code and find out what's out there.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that. But when you was growing up, did you do theater to help you get to acting in Hollywood?
I didn't. I did not. You know, when I was a kid, man, I remember my mom took me to see a stage show version of The Odd Couple, and that was in the Burke Community Players in Burke, Virginia. And the most interesting thing about it is that my buddy, I'll just give him a shout out. I haven't seen him in years, but Trey Johnson's father was playing the Oscar Madison character, like on the TV show or the movie The Odd Couple. He was playing the slob, the sports writer, the sloppy guy. And this guy, my friend's father, looked a lot like Jack Klugman, the actor on TV. So to me, it put a little thing in my head where it's like, oh man, they cast my friend's father because he looks a lot like the guy on TV. Now that wasn't the case. The case was that he was just a good actor who could pull off the role. But it started a little thing in my brain where it's like, oh, you got to look like the guy on TV to do the same role. But I mean, that experience of seeing The Odd Couple live in person when I was a little kid was so much fun because it was like, oh, that's my buddy's dad, and he's doing this play. And the stage was really nice, and I was such a small kid. We were literally had a kids section where we were just sitting on the floor watching this thing. You know what I mean? But I mean, that was a whole lot of fun. The same group, a couple of months later, did a show called The Rainmaker, which is kind of a classic production on stage too. It's an interesting show, a little more deep and dark than The Odd Couple. When I was a kid, man, you know, I'll just cut to the chase. In elementary school, I did some plays and stuff. I was pretty good in the theater in elementary school. When I got to middle school and high school, TK, I really went into a shell. I really went into, I wouldn't say a depression. I wouldn't go that far, but I'd say that my school was so big, so many students. I mean, we had 6 grades in the same building. My class had 585 students, and we were the smallest class in 15 years. We had classes at my school that had almost 1,000 kids, and it was such a place. I really didn't enjoy high school or middle school. I had a certain group of friends. We had the whole pro wrestling thing we were into. That was our escape. You know, certain fun things happen in high school, of course, but I mean, to be honest, I probably could have done acting then, but what I didn't do the theater group. Those kids, to be honest, were kind of marginalized, and they were just like their weird little group of actors that people, you know what I mean? Like, I never went to see the school plays or anything. But in my senior year of high school, I did get into something called a television production class. It was an elective, and it just kind of came up, TV production. And I don't know if I even asked anybody about it. I just kind of signed up, and I had a great time. I found myself writing these kind of parody commercials. I found myself acting in these parody commercials. I remember I did one video where I took highlights of a Sugar Ray Leonard boxing match, and I mixed it with the AC/DC song Thunderstruck. And I made this pretty cool video of Sugar Ray boxing and beating some dude up to the Thunderstruck. Donnie Lalonde, if anyone knows that fight. So, I mean, I just kind of got very experimental. What I started doing, TK, was I took 2 VCRs and a boombox, and I would put the VCRs and mix all the wires up so I could basically edit at home with this really crazy, I guess you'd call it an analog system. And other kids have done this, but I would basically take the video from one VCR, hook it into the audio from the CD boombox, or even an audio cassette, believe it or not, and mix that up with the recording VCR and make these crazy bootleg videos. I remember I did one for Elton John's song Rocket Man. I did one for this, believe it or not, Christian heavy metal band called Armored Saint. And I took footage from this really cryptic series of films called Faces of Death. I mean, I did some weird stuff, you know, I'm telling you. So
it sounds so creative. I've never even heard of some of that stuff, but it sounds like you always had an interesting mind.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. You know, when I was a kid and we would get assignments from school to write stories, people kind of took interest that, like, when it was me and a pencil or a pen, whatever it was, I'd write a story, man. I could write a story and people could get hooked. When it came to the social interaction, maybe not so much, to be honest with you. Like a lot of creative people, Sometimes I'm most creative or I'm more comfortable when I'm on camera instead of off. I said that to Vince Russo when we did our interview. When we got off, I said, Vince, I think maybe you're like me. You're more comfortable on camera than off camera, you know, and that could be the case with me.
Yeah, and after all that in high school or when you was a young adult, was there a particular actor that you wanted to learn from or that you wanted to maybe you emulate?
Tim Robbins. Tim Robbins was an actor. He still is, of course. Tim Robbins, super tall guy. He's like 6'6", and he did this movie called The Player. And The Player, I think, came out in the summer of '92. And when I saw this thing, it was a really interesting parody of the Hollywood film world, like a real brutal movie. And I mean, I'm trying to remember the exact particulars, but it's like there's a film producer, there's a screenwriter, and one of them kills the other. And then Tim Robbins' character is walking around Hollywood trying to make sense of the situation. And he's kind of a subterfuge. And there's Bruce Willis doing cameos and Julia Roberts. And when I saw this movie, TK, for some reason, although it's supposed to be a cryptic, horrible tale, it got me hooked. I'm like, man, I want to be in the Hollywood film industry.
That's interesting because I mean, I never heard of the movie, but I like to get different ideas from other people who inspired them. That's always interesting me. But for me, one of my favorite actors is Sylvester Stallone, and I know different. I know he acts different than a lot of people say he's not a good actor or stuff like that. And I'm just like he has a role and he's playing a character that he thinks is the best. So what do you say to people who tell actors they're not good actors, that they're not talented in that regard? Because I know Stallone is mostly action films and stuff like that.
Well, let's put it this way.
He can act.
Well, let's put it this way. It's better to be typecast than not cast, first of all. And second of all, when it comes to Sylvester Stallone, you're talking about a guy. I mean, the story of Stallone, it rings true with a lot of guys that I'm friends with because he was offered big money for that original Rocky 1 screenplay. I think they wanted James Caan. The studios wanted James Caan. There's some legendary story where Stallone said, no, I'm playing Rocky. I am Rocky. And the guy sold his dog in order to finance this film. He had to buy his dog back, the dog that's in Rocky. So, I mean, that story is so legendary of Stallone. And I think another part of that story was Stallone was kind of like wrangling with the script or the story. And he finally took himself aside. He put aluminum foil or something all over his windows, covered all his windows, covered his entire apartment in aluminum foil, and banged out the first draft of that script in like a weekend. That's how dedicated he was, and that's how intense he was. As far as Stallone's acting, I've enjoyed a lot of his work. I mean,
me too. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, stuff like Cliffhanger was a fun film. I mean, not only Rocky, but Rambo. I mean, this is a guy who hit 2 Grand Slams. I watched some of your video today of you were kind of putting over Rocky 5 and saying Rocky 5 is not so bad. And I think you're right. I mean, you nailed it, TK. You said it's the worst one of the series of all 7 films, going on 8, because I think Creed 2's coming out. Right. But as far as, is it worth watching? Is there something to be said for it? Sure. I mean, that dream sequence of Mickey coming from the grave to talk to him, and that's just great stuff, man.
Yeah. And then speaking of acting, I know, aren't you an acting coach for CORE?
Yeah, it's called CORE. Yeah, CORE Acting, COREACTING, CORE Acting, and I think I got the acronym down. I haven't talked about it in a while, but CORE Acting stands for. It originally stand for Character, Origin, Response, Environment, and then even the acting I had stand for Audience, Choice, Technique, Instinct, Need, Greatness. So I had like all these, I love acronyms for whatever reason. I love when you have a word and you break it down and you can make other words. So Character, Origin, Response, Environment, Audience, Choice, Training or Technique, Instinct, Need, Greatness. And that's what the acronym is. And when I taught classes for several years, actually, group classes up in Providence, Rhode Island, we would go through a technique a week sometimes, and we discuss like, hey, let's talk about the audience. What does an audience mean? When it's you and me talking right now, it's very intimate. It's just me and you talking, but we know we're a little bit aware that there's other people watching. So there might be something that I might say to you if I didn't think this was being recorded. I might say something that's a little more humorous, a little more edgy, but because we know we're being watched and, you know, social media, what it is and everything, we're going to, you know, censor ourselves. We're going to have that self-censorship. If you're doing live theater in front of 50 people, you might act differently than if you're doing in front of 500 people. Because if nothing else, the acoustics of your voice or your projection or your body movements are going to cater to that special audience. And trust me, I mean, if you're acting in front of 10 people, and that happens sometimes, even with the best of actors or the best of shows, if you're acting, you have say a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock crowd and only 10 people show up, you might be a little more experimental just to try something. But if you have a sold out Friday night show with 200 people in the audience, you're going to stick by the numbers because you don't want to throw anything off. So, I mean, even the audience is a variable. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And with the core company, have you brought along have any people who went to your acting classes, what did they get out of that, do you think? In those core classes?
I had one student. She didn't take. She was a student of mine, but she also was in a film that I directed called Blood Sugar Sedace. And this young lady went on to be was that Casey Affleck film? Was it? It won a couple of Oscars a couple of years ago. Manchester by the Sea. I think that's what it was called. She was in that. She had a pretty good role in that. I've worked with some people that have done some good things. I mean, a friend of mine named David Graziano took a lot of my classes, and he went on. We basically, David and I, you know, he's a guy who has a really interesting life story. We created his life story in a piece called The Actor, which is on YouTube. If you look up David Graziano, Graziano, and just look under his YouTube page, find The Actor. He won some awards for his acting for that, and the film itself won some awards, including from the Scene Festival out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island. A good friend of mine, Lawrence O'Leary, who was in Blood Sugar Sedace as the lead, has done some great stuff. I had a really interesting student, man, about 5 years ago. This young guy, you know, I'll never forget this kid, but he came to me, and I won't get into his personal story too much, but let's just say that he was kind of that unfulfilled potential type of guy. Yeah. Like just a really smart kid, hardworking kid, early 20s. And he was just kind of in a state of mind that wasn't so great. And I just really had to kind of snap him out of it. Next thing you know, the guy's going to theater school in New York City for 3 years, and he's doing great. I mean, he's got pictures on Facebook of him and in his classes in New York, and he's got these, you know, attractive actor girls with him, and they're all having a great time. I'm like, man, that guy is doing better than I am now. So, I mean, it's cool to see people turn things around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's one a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people understand. Like with acting, you have to, it's not easy. A lot of people look at it on TV. Oh, I can do that. Oh, that's easy. You have to put in the work. You have to sometimes know the right people, know what to do to get where the people are on TV. Like, what do you say to those people who thinks it easy or stuff like that?
Hey man, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And the reality is, bro, to tell you the truth, if they think it's easy, they have no clue, they have no idea. And the great thing is, I want them to think it's easy, because if those people who think it's so easy, they're the people that buy tickets. You know, someone's got to buy the tickets, man. So I mean, the people that don't probe or don't do research beyond the surface, and they just want to see their Robert De Niro movie and pay $12, and that's fine. And I like Robert De Niro too. That's not an insult against him, but it's just like, that's the audience. So at some point, you know, if people really want to engage in a serious conversation, I'll engage. But if they're just so much of a civilian, is what my acting teacher Barry Primus would call these type of folks, civilians. In the wrestling business, you call them marks. In the acting business, my buddy and my teacher Barry Primus would call them civilians. You just let them be civilians. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know because one of your best films, Disregard the Vampire, it won the best documentary for a short in 2018 for the Independent Horror Movie Awards. So I know you put in work on there. Could you tell the people more about what's that movie's about? Because I think that's one of your best films. I saw the trailer on that as well.
Well, thank you, TK. And you know what? For your audience here, people can just look that up under Mike Messier YouTube, and I'll let that go public tonight. So if people, you and everyone else can watch Disregard the Vampire, Mike Messier documentary, gratis, free, because that's a piece that, you know, at least 3 or 4 years was put into this thing. What happened, TK, was I did the cardinal sin of a screenwriter, which is, and you want to guess what the big sin is as a screenwriter?
Not writing down everything that you're supposed to do, like your notes and all that. Maybe leaving out key ideas. Maybe
that's a good one too. That's really good actually. But what I was thinking of was I wrote a script for a particular actor. I wrote a script with an actor in mind in order to work with him. And he wasn't a famous, big-time, nationally or internationally known actor. He was just a local actor who I'd seen his work. I respected this guy. He had a great look, and I really wanted to work with this guy. So I kind of wrote this whole thing with this dude in mind. Long story short, as people will see in this doc, we actually filmed, we were kind of revolving the whole process around this guy. We filmed the first day of shooting, I didn't even have him scheduled because I wanted to work the kinks out with the crew first. I wanted the crew to learn how to use the equipment properly. I wanted the other actors to get into motion. And I wanted to kind of like warm up the process so that the second day when we came in, this local actor that I wrote this thing for would be, have it easy. You know what I mean? Well, guess what happened? We shot the first day, 10 or 11 days of shooting. Everybody's tired, but we felt good. We had a nice day of shooting. And I get this really cryptic text from this dude. Can I call you? And I'm like, I'm calling him. I mean, I got that. I'm like, this does not sound right. So I'm trying to reach this guy. And then about an hour and a half or 2 or 3 hours later, he calls me. And this is 11 o'clock at night. We've already shot a day of this film without him. And he's telling me that he can't do the movie anymore. And but he wasn't even on set the first day because we didn't have him scheduled the first day. I've got all these people, these crew people. I've got the location. I've got 3 other actors that have all obliged their time, and this dude's not showing up. So bottom line, bro, we still made the movie. I found a guy who was a musician, a singer, a really great guy named Scorpio. He became a good friend. And I didn't even meet the guy until that next day. The next day, the connections, and it's all explained in the doc. But this Scorpio guy came and he auditioned, and we gave him the part. I mean, I wouldn't say we gave it to him. I think it was meant to be because Scorpio was such a cool guy to work with. Everybody loved him. And what basically happened with that project is because of this disruption in the casting, it wasn't a thing where, you lost a couple of hours and everything's fine. This poor guy, not saying poor guy, but just saying Scorpio didn't have the time to really rehearse. We had to give him time. Of course, Murphy's Law being what it is, Murphy's Law says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. One of our other actors, one of the actresses, had a math test for her college that next day. So everything was like on a thin wire, so to speak, with the scheduling. But when we made that casting change, it wasn't a simple thing of, one guy's out, one guy's in. It really affected the whole process and all our time. And then equipment issues, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the week, bro, we had some really good footage. But what we didn't really have, as much as it killed me to admit it, we didn't really have our feature film. We didn't have our vampire narrative. What we had was a collection of scenes that made sort of sense, but sort of didn't. And we had a hell of a story to tell, though. And I felt that the story of the people coming together and making something happen, despite these obstacles of time and equipment and all this other stuff, and snow in March, I decided, it was really my decision, let's make a documentary about this experience. Disregard the Vampire, a Mike Messier documentary was born. It took a long time to finish because there was a whole editing process and everything. And let's tell the story behind the story. People have told me that it's inspiring. People have told me that they feel motivated to go out and make a movie or to finish the movie. Yeah, man. People tell me it's, and to be honest with you, TK, the documentary version is probably more powerful for more people than the narrative ever would have been, because the narrative was so artsy and so art house and so gothic. But the fact that in the documentary, I'm just talking to the audience like I'm talking to you now, and people really feel affected by it in a positive way. They feel motivated. They feel inspired. They feel like, man, this guy doesn't quit. He keeps coming.
Yeah, and then with the other guy, did you guys not sign a contract? Like what happened with that? Because I mean, that's kind of rare to do, to not do the film.
Well, somebody passed away in his immediate circles. Oh, okay. And out of respect to him, I won't. It wasn't a family member of his, but out of respect to him, I try not to go into that story too much, because it's death, and so there's nothing that, you know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those deals where to really get into that would be like his version of events. And I don't want to speculate about it too much, and I want to be respectful to dying, to be honest with you. I mean, and so it's a thing where I haven't really, I saw the guy who dropped out or whatever once since. We shook hands. We were fine. But honestly, there's a thing with me, TK, man. I worry about the people that do show up, not the people that don't show up. You know what I mean? Like, if you, you know what I mean? So if I plan a party or a film event or anything, and like, you know, people say, oh, such and such didn't show up, do you want to call them? Or someone who didn't show up is calling or texting me with excuses or apologies. I always concentrate on the people that do show up, TK. I don't, for that moment, they're the people that matter, not the people that don't make it.
I agree. And before we go, can you give the audience and the people who's watching 3 things that you must do to become an actor, or maybe a director or producer or anything like that? The 3 keys.
Okay, well, 3 is a good question. I would say be open-minded. That's the biggest thing. One thing they teach a lot in say improv. Improv acting is acting without a script, you know, for the most part. There's a big rule in improv, which is never say no. So if you and I are doing an improv scene and they say, TK and Mike, you're the mailman and the butcher, and you've just bumped into each other at the local grocery store, and the butcher thinks that the mailman is sleeping with his wife, go. And then you and I start, and I say, hey, mailman, are you sleeping with my wife? And TK, your response would be, no, I'm not. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Well, you've kind of just killed the scene. So what you would want to say instead is, I might be, but why do you say that, Mr. Butcherman? Or you do something like, yeah, I am sleeping with your wife, and she's quite good in the sack, and what do you want to know about it? Like, you would have to spin it in a way to make it interesting. If you just shoot it down and say, no, I'm not sleeping with your wife, then we have nowhere to go with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's one thing. Now, that's a very specific acting improv example, but the bigger part of that was be open-minded. The second biggest thing I'll say is this, and I'm just shooting off the hip. I'm just really throwing stuff at you, but read these books. I'm going to give some books, and people can write this down. And on somewhere in MikeMessier.com, I have these books listed. I think the first one is the Power of the Actor. Ivana Chubbuck is the author. IVANACHUBBUCK. Ivana Chubbuck. I believe the book is titled The Power of the Actor, the 12-Step Acting Process from Ivana Chubbuck. She really goes into nuts and bolts specifics of acting, and I really like her process. I believe this woman is on the West Coast, California. I believe she has her own studio. I've never met the lady. I've never corresponded with her, but I love her book. The second book is Larry Moss, The Intent to Live, and I have an autographed copy of this book. I met this guy. He's great. Larry Moss has worked with Hilary Swank for Girls Don't Cry. I want to say that he worked with the big guy for The Green Mile, the really jacked up dude who passed away.
I know him.
Yeah, I think his name was Michael, I believe. But he worked with him for that Academy Award winning role. So the Intent to Live is really the story that people would probably relate to of a young boy, Larry Moss, who found escapism through being a film fan, and he'd go see these movies all weekend long to escape from his own kind of identity crisis as a young guy. And he went on to become one of the top two acting coaches in the country, along with Howard Fine, who I've also met. Howard Fine, believe it or not, went to the same college I did, Rhode Island College. If anyone watching this is in LA, get yourself over to Howard Fine Acting Studio, and take some introductory courses, or just do it. Just go to Howard Fine Acting Studio. I'm telling you, if you're in Los Angeles, if you can find Larry Moss, he's very expensive to work with, but he's in LA and New York. I just say that because he's a guy who works with the top people. You know what I mean? Those two books, and then there's a third book, which is probably the book I'd say is the best for beginners. It's a great book, though. It's called Audition by Michael Shurtleff. Now, for some reason, the book is called Audition, but it's really about all types of acting stuff. And this book is really a nice book. Michael Shurtleff, it's Shurtleff, but the book is definitely titled Audition. You can normally find it for $7 new. I mean, it's not an expensive book. There's another guy, Eric Moss, I believe. Really, this guy is prolific. I think he's still kicking it in California, but man, this guy, ERIC, first name Eric, last name, Eric Moss.
Yeah.
And being and doing. And this guy's got like 20 or 30 or 40 books that I've only scratched the surface with his stuff. So that would be my second thing. First thing, be open-minded. Second thing, get those books. Third thing, make your own projects. Now, I threw a curve at you because I did say go to community theaters and stuff like that. The third thing, TK, and you're already doing it. So you're already ahead of the game. You're doing this interview. You're interviewing famous basketball women athletes. You're interviewing all types of people. Do your own project. What you're doing, TK, and maybe you realize that maybe you didn't, you're basically training yourself. You're getting comfortable with camera. So you're giving yourself a screen presence. You're giving yourself networking. You're getting out there. You're meeting people. Now, does that translate to playing a role in a character with a script? Not dead on, but it's a helpful thing. You're getting comfortable with public speaking and video and everything. So you're making your own project already. So you're already halfway there. But for the people out there, and I was saying this the other day in my post, Vince Russo interview rant, I said, we have these things that I'm using right now, a smartphone, a device, and people are so empowered with that. If this thing, this very phone that I'm using was around 10, 15, 20 years ago, I can't imagine what I could have done, because I would have been blown up 1,000 times over. But people need to think about the fact that they have these smart devices. Even if they get a camera, it's not that expensive nowadays. So people don't have to feel, and this is the thing it drives me nuts, man. A lot of local actors in my vicinity especially are always waiting for someone else to do something. Or they'll come to me and they'll wonder what I'm doing something. Or they'll wonder when one of my friends is doing something. I'm like, man, I'm still hitting up my friends for roles too. Come on. But people don't want to think like, oh shit, I can direct my own fucking thing. Like, why does Mike Messier or why does such and such have to be the person to direct or produce when everyone who's got a smartphone, and they have film festivals, man, for these devices. I just got a 7-minute piece called It's Good to Be Hated into this Portugal Super 9 Mobile Film Fest that's on the internet now. And I shot this thing 3 weeks ago in a parking lot. You know what I mean? So it's like people really have to think about, do not wait for that phone to ring. You be the person calling somebody else for a change. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And with that, Mike, could you tell the people maybe like your website or your social medias or anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. First of all, I'd be remiss not to say, for the hub of all things Mike Messier is MikeMessier.com. If I was a website, I'd be MikeMessier.com. MikeMessier.com. Second thing I'd have to say is that today is actually a really cool day that you and I are talking, because a film that I was the lead writer and a co-star in, The Manor, is being released by Lionsgate today. I mean, it's at Walmart now. So I mean, if
I have to
people,
check it out.
yeah, I mean, if people don't like Walmart, well, take an exception for me today, because just go to Walmart or Video on Demand. Either has it right now or soon enough. The Manor has got Sully Erna, the lead singer of Godsmack. It's got Christina Robinson, who was Aster in the show Dexter. Me and Sully and a pro wrestler that you know Mike Canales or Mike Bennett, play brothers. So yeah, we're kind of like the hillbilly Three Stooges, man. And then we've got Rachel True, who was a huge star in a movie called The Craft, this horror film classic. And Rachel plays Dr. Trivniak. The movie's got some really interesting themes, man. And to be honest with you, going into it, man, I mean, not to be dramatic, but it's kind of like going into war. When you make a movie, it's kind of like a little battle. It's like a little war. And part of it, the guys I went to battle with, we all brought something to the table. But it's cool to see that some of my themes, some of the things that I was really personal stuff to me, like there's a scene that people are loving in this movie of this great actor, Armin Garrow, portraying the father, teaching his son how to play chess. And he starts enacting the pieces by singing about the pieces of chess. And that was based on my own father teaching me how to play chess, man. So, I mean, there's some real personal things in this movie. Rachel True playing a doctor, Dr. Trivniak, which was kind of based on someone that I knew in my own life. So, I mean, it's kind of a wild thing. People can see this movie no matter where they are. The Manor. Horror film, I'd say it's best watched at midnight, the midnight hour, man. And then people who are already filmmakers, I have a film festival that I'm very involved in called Avalonia Festival. And if they go to distancefromavalon.com, the first word is distance, DISTANCEFROMAVALON, distancefromavalon.com. If they click around, they'll find the Avalonia Film Festival. It's a Film Freeway Top 100 Best Film Festival ranked by filmmakers, not by me. So, I mean, the people want to enter their films. They want to get connected. Please, the Avalonia Film Festival tonight actually is the end of super early bird deadline. But then we segue right into early bird deadline. So, I mean, we got plenty of time. The actual festival will be on December 7th. That'll be the third one, Avalonia Festival 3. Disregard the Vampire Mike Messier documentary is on my YouTube channel. For the wrestling fans, you've seen a different side of me tonight. Thanks to you, buddy, because I appreciate it, TK, because tonight you're going to be seeing some all the pro wrestling rants are on the playlist on YouTube. I mean, I think like 110 or 112. I'm doing a podcast now. Another Vince Russo guy, Cole, the sports guy, and myself are doing What Have They Done to Our Sport? We'll be taping tomorrow, our second episode, which we kind of compare the wrestling of today and the wrestling of yesteryear, and we kind of make comparisons. And then my buddy JG, man, he's generating heat, and I've been a guest star on his podcast a couple times. He's going right for the jugular on this Cody Rhodes thing, man. It's hardcore. We did a really awesome episode last night that I think even Cody listened to, and I try to kind of put my 2 cents in as a longtime fan of the Dusty Rhodes family and of Vince Russo, and just, man, why are these guys not working together? But who knows? Maybe we're all being worked. Who knows, man?
Yeah, hopefully, because man, I didn't like what he did to my man Vince Russo, man. He didn't to call him a homophobe, man. At least listen to watch some of his videos before you're gonna make a false narrative comment like that. I just hated that, man. I hope it is a work though. Hopefully
it is, but you know what? Sometimes what happens, buddy, is, and I'm not making excuses for Cody, but I would say that sometimes when you're doing business, so to speak, and you get these messages from people, and I'm just trying to give Cody the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was so overwhelmed with the whole promotion of this thing, he just had to make a judgment call real quick and didn't think about what he was doing. And maybe if he took the time to listen to me and JG, I pointed out hardcore. I said, bro, to Cody, why don't you just call your brother's ex-wife, Terry Runnels, and ask her about the character of Vince Russo? because there's an entire video online of Vince Russo interviewing Terry Runnels. And I'm serious, like, she is the mom of Cody's niece. So, I mean, you got to think, divorce notwithstanding, there's still some connection there. And why don't you just call her up and say, hey, Terry, can you just give me a character reference on Vince Russo? Is he a jerk? Is he a cool guy? Blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, who's to say what's what with the wrestlers, man? And that's all I really want to say, because, honestly, I said so much about that situation last night. People can listen to me and JG talk about it for an hour, literally. But I do feel that, man, I was watching some wrestling tonight, and what I was watching was like this. It was called World Series of Wrestling, and it was like from Australia. It was Marty, the Bullet Club guy, Marty, against Austin Aries. And I'm like watching this match, and it's like tearing my heart apart, man. There was so many things in that match that I didn't like. Not the athleticism, not the wrestlers, but there were things that they were doing and how the crowd was responding. And I was thinking, man, what the hell have they done to our sport? This isn't wrestling anymore. This is a parody of what wrestling used to be. And people might get offended by that, but I'm sorry. I was offended by the whole match.
That's fair. That's fair. And Mike, hey, can you stay on the line? Because I want to end the broadcast, but I want to say thank you to you personally offline. So could you stay there?
Most definitely. I want to thank you and all your viewers. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, cool. All right, guys. Today we had something a little different. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, I might have on another athlete or another actor. But until then, I'm your boy. I'm everyone's boy, the Tiki Moss. Peace out, y'all.